The following program contains graphic material, including offensive language. Viewer discretion is advised.
Well, it seems Republican governors have taken to shipping illegal immigrants to liberal land. Ron DeSantis chartered a flight full of immigrants to Martha's Vineyard. I bet he misunderstood that plan at least a little bit when his staff first brought it up. He was sitting in there like, oh, that's great. Yeah, we'll fly in real low, push them out, hashtag drone the libs, right? That's awesome. No, sir, no, we thought we'd just land and leave them there, you know, like a PR stunt. Oh, well, that's okay too, I guess. Hey, can we at least include a card that says, Happy Hispanic Heritage Month, got you some Mexicans? Listen, I know that most of these people are from Venezuela, but you got to understand, in the eyes of the other side, any type of brown immigrant is some form of Mexican, okay? That's just how their brains work. They're ignorant. Also, I bet Matt Gaetz busted in at one point like, hey, what's up? I heard you're human trafficking. Can I get in on that? What's going on? These people are monstrous, man. These are families, desperate ones, women and little children, treated as political pawns with no regard for their humanity. That's right. The what would Jesus do, won't someone think of the children crowd strikes again, y'all. Well, we all remember that famous Bible verse. And lo, the beggar did come before the Son of God in his most desperate state. And Jesus spake unto him, ugh, gross. Throw him at the neighbors. These people are ridiculous, man. It's never been more clear that they are all in on cruelty as a platform. But I think people are starting to notice on both sides. I saw a clip a couple weeks ago, this little Texas mamaw who said she was a lifelong Republican, but would be voting for Beto because, I quote, they've just gotten so mean. Yes, it was both precious and prescient, in my opinion, because it seems the Republicans have decided that because alleviating any of the actual suffering of their base is clearly out of the question, inflicting suffering upon others must be the next best thing. But I don't know if continuing to dehumanize, provoke, and persecute every other minority demographic in an increasingly diverse country in the name of pandering to the most unhinged and unstable subsection of the already slim majority makes for the wisest long-term strategy. But what do I know? I didn't go to political college. What I do know is when those people got off that plane, those godless coastal elite liberals fed them, clothed them, treated them with dignity and respect, which I feel like kind of sums up the difference pretty concisely. Also, I bet there was at least a handful of native Floridians this morning like, God damn, will you pay to fly me somewhere people know how to treat each other? Shit.
Are you ready? Hey everybody, it's Jeff. Nice to see everybody here. So, nice day here in Maine. Breezy and it's in the low 70s. So it's really a nice day for a Friday. Well, okay, there's a story I want to get to. Okay, but before I get to that, I'm going to go to this story here just to get it out of the fucking way because, you know, the other story is going to take more time, and I want to make sure that this story gets out here to people. There's an article here from People magazine written by Alexandra Schoenfield, published 51 minutes ago here, and it's entitled, Marjorie Taylor Greene appears to kick young activists during confrontation about gun safety. It says an 18-year-old activist is claiming that Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene kicked her during a recent confrontation over gun violence. Mariana Pecora, who is a member of Gen Z-led civic group Voters for Tomorrow, told the Washington Post how the situation unraveled from her point of view. Quote, we were walking sort of as a group because we were having a conversation. I would say we were having what I would consider to be a pretty respectful conversation with her, unquote, Pecora said, quote, and there was a group of people, so I kind of got pushed forward so I would still fit on the sidewalk, and I was in front of her and she started kicking me, unquote. In a video which Green48 shared on her own Twitter account yesterday, the Congresswoman appears to kick the 18-year-old who was walking in front of her.
Folks, it's So Texas Paul. This is definitely, I had to come down to a cussing pond video. And I came down to the big cussing pond for this one, so you better hold on to your britches. I need you to take a look at this video of Marjorie Taylor Greene kicking this young lady. Go ahead and roll the video. I'll see you on the other side.
How does the Second Amendment prevent gun violence? You're the one that believes that the insurrection
step out of the
was
way.
a tourist.
You're blocking a member of Congress. You're blocking a
You as
member
a
of Congress. You
citizen
need
talking
to stay
to
away.
members of Congress.
You
Believes that the
You're blocking a member of Congress. You're blocking a member of Congress.
That, my friends, is MAGA. Twice. She was a complete, utter asshole. A self-entitled, worthless, horrible, disgusting human being, which sums up MAGA personally. I mean, just perfectly. Perfectly. This is how they govern. Screw you, little people. Who the hell do you think you are? I am a congressman. Who are you? That is who these people are. They don't give a shit about you. They don't give a shit about you. If you're in their way, or you're something that they have to deal with that they don't want to deal with, fuck you. Fuck you. Get out of my way. Congressman is a servant. A congressman is a person that is supposed to take care of the people. And these fucking people are worthless. Every damn one of these Republicans have that same self-entitled, bullshit, piece of shit attitude. Every fucking one of them. You look at the responses that they make to this. You look at the excuses they make for her. Well, folks, we are accountability. We are the accountability. It's on tape. You need to call Nancy Pelosi's office and demand that she take action. She needs to sanction this congressperson. And I don't know where this took place, but if it was on Capitol grounds, we need to be calling the Capitol PD. That was an assault, and it's on tape.
But it goes to show you her attitude around people. If you don't agree with her, you know, she's going to shut you down some way, you know, to get you out of her face. She don't want to hear any opposition to her point of view. And that's, you know, that's the way she is. We always knew that about her. So I just, you know, I wanted to just show that here to people so that way, you know, you know, folks understand, you know, this is who you got here for the Republican Party. You know, people like this that are really nasty, and they just, you know, they don't care who they step on, okay? Especially this woman here, all right? And this story here goes in line with another story here that shows how mean-spirited Republicans are today. And you probably already know what I'm going to talk about here. But I want to do a little bit here, talking on this issue here, what was done after I tell you the story. Okay, from this point of view on this article, because for those of you who already know what I'm going to talk about, this story here, which is related to the one that happened, is told, you know, from another nut in the Republican Party. So this is from Newsweek, written by Nick Mordwank, published 5 hours ago, and it's entitled "Steve Bannon cheers Ron DeSantis as national leader after migrant flights. Okay. DeSantis has taken credit for sending about 50 migrant men, women, and children, mostly Venezuelan, on 2 planes to the Massachusetts island on Wednesday. He told Fox News that he sent the quote-unquote illegal migrants to a progressive state to protest President Biden's liberal immigration policies. Bannon praised DeSantis for, quote, making elites in Martha's Vineyard panic, unquote. DeSantis said during a press conference Thursday that he was helping migrants reach, quote-unquote, greener pastures, while blaming Biden for allowing illegal drugs like fentanyl and, quote, millions of people, unquote, into the country. Quote, if you have folks that are inclined to think Florida is a good place, our message to them is we are not a sanctuary state, and it's better to be able to go to a sanctuary jurisdiction, unquote, DeSantis said Thursday. On Thursday, Republican Governor Greg Abbott of Texas sent migrants to the residence of Vice President Kamala Harris in Washington, D.C. Quote, Governor DeSantis reinforces image as national leader in forcing illegal immigration to the top of the news, unquote, Bannon wrote on a social media platform, Getter. Probably should say gutter. Democrats are, quote, seething with anger, unquote, and on their, quote, back foot, unquote, Bannon added. Bannon used immigration as a key issue to galvanize Republicans while he worked on former President Donald Trump's 2016 campaign, later becoming a chief strategist in the White House. Bannon later encouraged former speechwriter Stephen Miller to have a bigger stake in the role of immigration in the administration. Trump's election led to a promotion to senior policy advisor for Miller, who was referred to by the Southern Poverty Law Center as, quote, the driving force behind many of the administration's draconian immigration policies, unquote. Bannon, one of the major proponents of Trump's Build the Wall campaign, recently turned himself into authorities after being charged with 2 felony counts of money laundering, 2 felony counts of conspiracy, and 1 felony count of a scheme to defraud. Nice guy, huh? It is alleged in court documents that the CEO of Bannon's former We Build the Wall organization received $20,000 monthly payments and a $100,000 upfront payment despite publicly stating that he would, quote, personally not take a penny of compensation, unquote, for his work with the nonprofit. So, yeah, you got a bitch on one side in the GOP kicking people that, make her feel uncomfortable about her position on guns. And you got a governor in Florida who's trying to be cute by dumping people, which is being debated right now in the halls of government, whether it was illegal for him to do what he did, because they think it's human trafficking. And, they're investigating whether there should be charges filed against the governor for what he'd done. But regardless, he takes these people and he dumps them off in Martha's Vineyard, thinking that, they're going to get mad up there. Well, yeah, they did get mad, but not the way he thought, okay? They got mad at him for doing what he did, but they treated those people that showed up on the buses and stuff like that with respect and kindness, and they were welcomed by the people of Massachusetts, which is kind of a hard thing for me to believe because I've been through that state many different times, and most of the time it's always been sort of a negative thing in that state. Okay, but the fact that these people showed up, and it was all on video. I mean, they had the cameras, the news was there, and everything, and these people didn't shame them, or didn't shout obscenities at them like they do in Florida. Okay, they didn't do any of that shit there. These people showed up and they were welcomed, and of course not all of them are going to be able to stay in the United States because there's a certain criteria you have to meet in order to be taken in. Okay, sort of like the refugees and stuff coming in from Ukraine. You gotta have a certain criteria to meet in order to be taken in like that. So some will stay, some won't stay, but it's not because people are being mean-spirited by just getting rid of folks the way the governor in Texas or the governor in Florida would do. They're being treated fairly under our laws, okay, such as they are, and you know it'll be decided through that whether or not these people can actually stay, okay. Instead of just arbitrarily, you know, stating that these people are not welcome here and they're all going back. Okay, these two governors just don't even want to hear the fucking argument why they're here or why they're trying to flee Venezuela or Mexico or wherever else they're coming from. They don't want to hear the argument. They just do not care. Okay, now, like I said, this backlash here of what DeSantis did isn't just in Massachusetts, but it's, you know, all over the country. A lot of people were very surprised at DeSantis doing what he did, although I'm not, okay? Considering the worst thing he's done so far is allowed so many of his Floridians, or Floridiates, I should say, to die of COVID without lifting a finger to help anybody, okay? He actively tried to get people to avoid taking safety steps to protect themselves, okay? To me, that's worse than, you know, anything he's done up to now, okay? I'm just saying. So his label as Ron death sentence is well deserved, okay? Because that's basically what's, you know, it's like Trump. Trump's the same way. He's a death sentence too, okay? He's responsible for over 1 million deaths in this country just by telling people they don't need to wear masks, they don't need to get shots, it was a hoax, it's this and that, you know, okay? By doing all that, he basically discouraged Americans to go get help. He took away from, you know, Dr. Fauci's, you know, warnings to America, like, you know, you people need to go get vaccinated. This is a serious thing, okay? And then he comes out and says, "Oh, don't listen to that old fuck," you know, and words to that effect. And he gets his cronies there to say the same thing, right? Spread the word. Tell everybody to ignore the bastard. He goes to war with his own CDC, right? You know, so Ron death sentence, following step on the heels of Trump doing that, you know, basically telling Floridians not to bother listening to the president, or not to listen to Dr. Fauci or anybody else that's saying that this is not a hoax, okay? Because we deemed that it is, and thus you shall believe it. Okay, and that's basically, you know, how Trump led the country. That plus giving, you know, huge tax breaks to the rich who can go back and buy their own damn stock so they can artificially inflate the value of their companies. You know, it's just, it's incredible that, you know, this is going on. But I think people are waking up now to the fact that the Republican Party is making a lot of bad moves, okay? There's Republicans in the Republican Party who want to see a Republican president, and they're not going to get that when the Republicans are acting like fucking savages, okay? No American, Republican or Democrat, want the world to see us as being fucking barbarians. And that's what this death sentence has done so far, and Trump too. Okay? There's Republicans out there that would like to see a new face on their party, and Trump ain't it. They won't say it, but I know goddamn well they don't want him around that party anymore, okay? Because he's brought it down, he's flushed it down the toilet, and, you know, how these people are going to get it back is going to is determine on who the fuck they vote for. Now, next year during the primaries for the presidency, the GOP is going to tear itself apart, okay? And what I mean by that is because it seems like there's a game going on inside the party, like who can outdo the most, you know, outdo the other. You know, they're trying to go as low, a race to the bottom of the barrel as they can get, okay? They're trying to see who can be the meanest in the party, okay? Because do you see any Republican out there advocating for something positive? Have you listened to some of the things these people believe in, you know, as of late? I mean, these folks are basically doubling down on the bigotry, the racism, the irresponsibility of governing, of taking away rights from women, from people that marriage and couples and stuff like that. They're too busy trying to take away from us instead of giving to us. Okay, that's what they're doing. And I don't see how any Republican right now can be satisfied with their party spiraling down the toilet bowl like this and say, you know, we want to have a president that's Republican. Well, that's not going to happen if your party keeps going down this road. Okay, it's not going to happen. You know, what you're doing is you're forcing your own party to switch sides. They're leaving the Republican Party, such as it is, and they're saying, I'm going to be an independent or I'm going to join the Democrat Party. Because you guys are completely fucked out of your mind, okay? We don't want not a damn thing to do with you. You're the worst representatives of this country that we could possibly ever have. And in fact, we don't want you leaving this country. We don't want you being a public figure. We want you to be stuck at home on your couch, eating pizza, watching wrestling. Okay, stay there. Don't come out and start, you know, making speeches because you embarrass the country at large. You're an embarrassment, all right? You're the worst thing that's ever happened to this country, you know, those people out there. The Trumplicans are, you know, they're worse than any group of folks that we've ever had going through this country, okay? Because they're in the seats of power, which makes it worse. Before, they were just idiots out on the street, you know, with their hoods on, and they're burning crosses and stuff like that. And the most they could do was go door to door to people and, you know, beat the hell out of folks. Well, now with the seats of power that they have, they can take that attitude on a national scale in blue states and red states and everywhere, and spreading their racism abroad in a big fucking way. You know, and they've already spawned little cults here from the main party, you know, like QAnon. You know, and what is it, the pretty boys or whatever the hell they call themselves. I mean, you know, and the lost puppies or whatever they, you know, whatever they want to call themselves. Okay, they've made splinter groups out there, additional ones on top of the white supremacists, and that's what their party has contributed to this country recently. They haven't done a damn thing, you know, to bring jobs into this country, except for the handful that sided with Biden. Okay, they haven't done a damn thing about, you know, how we can improve and streamline to make our medical system more efficient and more approachable for people under different incomes. They haven't talked about any of that. Okay, none of that's been brought up. They haven't discussed anything about the gun violence issue that we have in this country and how we can, you know, correct that problem. They don't talk about it. You know, instead what they talk about is giving us more guns to continue this escalation. It's as if they want people to destroy themselves in this country the quickest way they can. You know, I mean, all it's missing is discounts on the fucking streets of guns in the gun stores. You know, here, you can have this gun for $2. You know, I mean, that's what's coming next. They can't give people enough weapons out here. You know, and so they're trying to, you know, get people access to guns who shouldn't have them. They want them to have them. They want them to load them. They want them to walk around town like they're going hunting in downtown New York City. You know, that's what they want. They want people everywhere on their nerves, on the edge. The minute they hear a sound, they open fire, and that's the end. 1,000 people get killed. That's what they want. That's the kind of America they want. How in the hell is that pro-American? How the hell is that a democracy? You know, that's not a democracy. That's not the way a democracy is, but yet they want us to think that a democracy leads to that, okay? It only leads to that when people who vote don't vote the right way, when people don't vote for the sane individual in the crowd that wants to do good for this country. Instead, you get people voting for lunatics and comedians and actors and, you know, stuff like that, people who have really no background in politics, but want to be a president. They want to go around the education it takes to be a lawyer or a politician or somebody in law and earn their way up the ranks. No, they want to skip all that. Instead, they just want to go, you know, from being the guy next door to the president of the United States, okay? Like that guy or that person, that woman has any business at all sitting in that fucking chair, okay? All right? I mean, if we do that, we might as well say any person can be a CEO of any company they want because they don't need an education to get there. They can just say, I want that chair and take it, okay? I mean, Donald Trump is pretty much showing us that, isn't he? I mean, that's basically what his presidency was about, is that if you got enough goddamn money, you can buy your way into the White House no matter what, okay? You don't even have to have a criteria. You don't even have to background. in politics to be a president. Okay, that's what he's shown us. So the Republican Party today is really a shame. It's an embarrassment, a blight on American culture, and you know, we have to put the reins on it. We got to control that. We got to reel them in from the extreme ledge here that they're hanging off of, because they're going to pull the rest of us down with them if we don't. Okay, we have to bring them back to planet Earth and say, look, this is not the America we want. Okay, we left the 1950s behind. Okay, and we don't want to have to go back through all your shit because you think that America was great when it was racist, when it was, you know, out there taking people's rights away. No, America was not great then. We fixed that problem to try to make it great, but you guys keep pulling it back the reins. You keep trying to take it all back, you know, so we have to stop them whenever they try. And this election coming up for president next year, whatever, is going to be an important one, because it's going to say, what kind of United States do we want to be from that point on? Are we going to be the United States the country was founded on, or are we going to take that foundation and gut it, burn it, crush it, shatter it, and say we're starting over? You know, what do you want to do? Do you think that the people who want to shatter and crush all that, the foundation, have your best interests at heart? These people who vote for them are voting against themselves, or voting against, you know, their own welfare. You know, that's not sane thinking. As far as I'm concerned, these people are going to get hurt. Let's have a commercial break. We'll be right back.
This is me.
This is me.
This is me!
This is me.
I'm Alex Curtis. I'm a lobsterman in Maine, and this is me.
I'm Ruth McLaughlin, and this is me.
I'm Eric Hopkins. I'm an artist, and this is me.
This
is me.
Me.
This is me.
This is me.
This is me.
At the end of the journey, the main thing is you. Original.
Once upon a time, in a place called Mzansi, the people loved driving cars everywhere. They used lots and lots of electricity and chopped down many trees for firewood. And then a very strange thing happened. The weather began to change. In some places there were droughts where before there was rain. In other places the rivers flooded. The grown-ups realized they were contributing to the strange weather. They discovered if they used clean energy and less electricity, they could save Mzansi for their children.
What happened then?
How the story unfolds is up to each and every one of us. Switch off, recycle, change. Help save tomorrow.
We need to send a very big message to the federal government that we're not going to take this anymore. We need to fire the federal government.
Interesting idea. Maybe it's a good idea. Of course, 42% of Arizona's budget comes from the federal government, so that would require a 72% increase in state taxes to fill the gap. You got that kind of money? No more Social Security checks. No more Medicare. Luke Air Force Base? Gone. In fact, say goodbye to most of the Air Force, Army, Marine bases all over the state. Arizona students would need to figure something else out because federal student aid would have to go. And sadly, all the national parks, including the Grand Canyon, well, they'd have to close. And we'd also lose all of our air traffic controllers, which sounds fun. But hey, drug traffickers would be happy. There wouldn't be a DEA in the state anymore.
We need to fire the federal government.
Right now, Carrie Lake is just a kook with crazy ideas. But if Arizona elects her for governor, her crazy ideas could crush Arizona's economy, raise our taxes, make our communities less safe, and turn Arizona into a national joke. Does this still sound like a good idea?
Trump is bad for the party, I disagree with you. I think President Trump is good for the party.
What is your reaction to hearing what Donald Trump says?
Disgusted. And he doesn't have the temperament or judgment to control himself when he gets mad. He's a jackass. Donald Trump is the most unelectable Republican I've seen in my lifetime. And I'm a Republican and he's not. He's a race-baiting, xenophobic, religious bigot. I think he's a kook. I think he's crazy. I think he's unfit for office. He doesn't represent my party, and he shouldn't be commander-in-chief.
We found something in common. I've come to like him, and he likes him.
Be a part of the entertainment value of a lifetime.
I loved it.
It was the best performance I've seen in a lifetime.
I loved the show. I liked it very much. He's a very entertaining man. It's well worth the money.
Now appearing in Charlottetown, coming to Halifax November 6th to the 18th, and St. John November 20th through the 26th.
Okay, everybody, welcome back. Now, as I think I had kind of mentioned here in the previous segment, what Ron DeSantis had done in Florida was very similar to an incident that occurred many decades ago. Well, there's an article here that will illustrate what was done here, and this is from NPR, written by Gabriel Emanuel, and this was written in February of 2020. Okay, but this piece of history occurred, and it shows where Ron DeSantis was trying to repeat history here, okay? And it's entitled The Cruel Story Behind the Reverse Freedom Rides. After 3 days on a Greyhound bus, Leila Mae Williams was just an hour from her destination in Hyannis, Massachusetts, when she asked the bus driver to pull over. She needed to change into her finest clothes. She had been promised the Kennedy family would be waiting for her. It was late on a Wednesday afternoon, nearly 60 years ago, when that Greyhound bus from Little Rock, Arkansas, pulled into Hyannis. It slowed to a stop near the summer home of President John F. Kennedy and his family. When the doors opened, Leila Mae and her 9 youngest children stepped on the pavement. Reporters as microphones pointed at her, their cameras trained on her family. The photographs in the next day's newspaper show Leila Mae looking immaculate in an elegant black dress, a triple string of pearls, and a white hat. She was dressed to start a new life. Quote, she was going to have a job, and she was going to be able to support her family, unquote. One of Leila Mae's daughters, Betty Williams, remembered in a recent interview. Before coming north to Massachusetts, Leila Mae had been promised a good job, good housing, and presidential welcome. But President Kennedy was not there to meet her, and there was no job or permanent housing waiting for her in Hyannis. Instead, Leila Mae and the others were unwitting pawns in a segregationist game. Quote, it was one of the most inhuman things I have ever seen, unquote, recalled Margaret Mosley, a longtime civil rights activist in Hyannis, in a televised interview a few years before her death. Fuming over the civil rights movement, Southern segregationists had concocted a way to retaliate against Northern liberals. In 1962, they tricked about 200 African Americans from the South into moving north. The idea was simple. When large numbers of African Americans showed up on northern doorsteps, Northerners would not be able to accommodate them. They would not want them, and their hypocrisy would be exposed. The reverse freedom rides have largely disappeared from the country's collective memory. The scheme almost never appears in history books and is little known even in Hyannis, the primary target of the ploy. But some hear echoes of that segregationist past in America's present. And for the families that came to the North based on a lie, the journey has cast an enduring shadow on their lives. In the summer of 1961, black and white activists who became known as the Freedom Riders boarded Greyhound buses and crisscrossed the South with the goal of integrating interstate buses and bus terminals. When the buses pulled into southern cities, they were greeted by mobs armed with bats and firebombs. Southern segregationists, who were still furious over the school desegregation fights that dominated the 1950s, saw the Freedom Riders as sanctimonious provocateurs. In a television interview from the time, Ned Touchstone of Louisiana, a spokesperson for a local segregationist group, said the North was, quote, sending down busloads of people here with the express purpose of violating our laws, fomenting confusion, trying to destroy 100 years of workable tradition and good relations between the races, unquote. Touchstone and other segregationists thought there was no way the Freedom Riders or their fellow Northern liberals actually cared about integrating interstate transit or advancing civil rights. Instead, they were convinced it was a strategy to embarrass the South and capture black votes for the Democratic Party. The segregationists decided to answer the Freedom Rides with the reverse Freedom Rides. They would use the same weapon, Greyhound buses, and send African Americans to northern cities. Quote, for many years, certain politicians, educators, and certain religious leaders have used the white people of the South as a whipping boy, to put it mildly, to further their own ends and their political campaigns, unquote, said Amos Guthridge, a lawyer from Arkansas who helped spearhead the reverse Freedom Rides. Quote, we're going to find out if people like Ted Kennedy and the Kennedys, all of them, really do have an interest in the Negro people, really do have a love for the Negro, unquote. The segregationists tapped into a network of local groups called citizens' councils. Despite this sanitized name, The councils were easily, quote, the Ku Klux Klan without the hoods and the masks, unquote, said historian Clive Webb. Webb, a professor at the University of Sussex in England, specializes in studying racists. 15 years ago, he published the first and still the only major academic article on the Reverse Freedom Riders. The Citizens Council attempted to cloak their racism in respectability, Webb said. They held meetings in fancy downtown hotels, wore suits and ties. Quote, they could be members of the police force, unquote, said Webb. Quote, they could be bankers, businessmen, and the like, unquote. These men masterminded an advertising effort with flyers and radio commercials to attract African Americans to accept bus tickets bought with money the councils had raised. Their ideal recruits were single mothers with many children and men who had gotten entangled in the criminal justice system. Quote, they targeted people who were either welfare recipients or prison inmates, unquote, said Webb. Quote, people who were placing a burden as they saw it on public resources, unquote. Then they sought media attention. George Singleman of Louisiana, who claimed credit for the original idea, had once worked in a newsroom. He made sure to alert the press. Quote, Negro ride plan stirs new furor, unquote, read a front page headline in the New York Times. The Boston Herald added, quote, 14 more jobless Negroes sent north, unquote, as spring rolled into summer and then fall. Nearly daily articles chronicled the scheme as it unfolded. Relishing the coverage, Guthridge said in an interview, quote, if it takes 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years, 5 or 10 years, we will continue it until the white people up there tell those politicians we are tired of using the American Negro for a pawn just for their votes, unquote. But when talking to reporters, the segregationists were not always so transparent about their motives. They offered ever-changing justifications for their scheme. Ned Touchstone said his primary motivation was, quote, to bring about a more equitable distribution of the colored population, unquote. He added that African Americans were begging for assistance. Quote, is it a crime to help people who come to you and say, boss, man, I want to go to the north, unquote, he said. Singleman cited American tradition as the rationale for the reverse freedom rides. Quote, our forefathers put everything in their possession into covered wagons and went out across the plains. In those days, it was rugged Americanism. Now today, for some reason or other, it's being frowned upon. I don't understand it, unquote, he said. The Citizens Council's plan didn't quite work how they had wanted. They envisioned sending thousands north, but the reality amounted to a couple hundred. Those folks boarded buses to New York, New Hampshire, Indiana, Idaho, Minnesota, California, and elsewhere. Layla Mae Williams and her children were part of the 96 unwitting reverse freedom riders who arrived at a makeshift bus stop closest to the Kennedy Summer White House on Cape Cod. They were far, far away from their rural Arkansas home. For generations, the Williams family lived on the border of Louisiana and Arkansas. Betty and Mickey were born in the tiny town of Huddig, Arkansas. They had a little farm and big family. Betty Williams, who was 18 years old when the family moved north, recalled the joy of fishing in the pond and out back and scampering down the path to relatives' houses. But her memories are also colored by the trauma of whippings, by the school headmaster and relatives dying without a doctor to visit them. Quote, I remember the flooding in the house, snakes underneath the beds, unquote, said Mickey Williams, one of Betty's brothers. He was 5 when the family left Huddig, and his memories of the South are few and faded. But he does remember that the family struggled financially. Quote, we were poor, unquote, he said. Quote, we were really poor, unquote. Still, Mickey and Betty said their late mother, Layla Mae, managed to cook all their meals from scratch and insisted on schooling for every child. At the time, Arkansas was segregated, and the Williams family was confined to the black side of town. Growing up, Betty didn't know anyone who was white. Quote, I never thought about why we were separated like this, why we can't go to school together, why we can't sit and eat together. I never even questioned that, unquote, she said. But Betty's mother was aware of the political forces that swirled outside their three-room house, and she wanted better things. So, when she heard about buses heading up north and promises of jobs and housing, she was enticed. And when she heard the Kennedys would greet the travelers, she was even more enthusiastic. She kept portraits of John and Robert Kennedy hanging on a wall next to one of Martin Luther King Jr. Quote, my mom thought that when she came to the North, she was going to have a better life for her children, better jobs, better housing, unquote, said Betty. Quote, everything that a mom could do, everything within her power, everything within her reach, my mom did it, unquote. So Layla May accepted tickets to take her family up north. The Sunday after the school year was finished, 2 cars came to pick up Layla May and her 9 youngest children, ages 2 to 14, and take them 150 miles to Little Rock's bus terminal. Betty would follow on a different bus later that summer. Amos Guthridge himself drove them and bought the children ice cream and root beer. The segregationist lawyer had alerted the local news outlets that he'd be holding a press conference when they arrived at the bus terminal. He stood at the center of a small crew of journalists. Ernie Dumas, a young reporter for the Arkansas Gazette, was there. Quote, he made a little grinning speech, unquote, Dumas, now 81, recalled. Guthridge pointed to the family and said, quote, these fine people, this wonderful woman, and her fine little children, unquote, Dumas remembered. He thinks he saw Guthridge wink at his fellow segregationists who sat off to the side. Then he remembers that Guthridge said, quote, we're going to send them up to Massachusetts, and the Kennedys and those fine people up there are going to take care of them and give them a better life, unquote. Dumas was not able to interview Layla May that May in 1962, but he remembers her seeming a little reluctant, perhaps a little embarrassed. In silent TV footage taken at the bus station, he looked focused. Some of the kids seemed giddy, flashing smiles at the camera, and playing with a well-loved rabbit doll. Others were subdued, sitting quietly in pairs on the wooden benches in the waiting room. The family had very little luggage. After all, most of the Reverse Freedom Riders were told everything was going to be provided. After the press conference, Layla May herded her children onto the bus, toward the back of the bus, and then onward, toward a promise that was a lie. And the weeks before the Williams family boarded the Greyhound bus, the very first Reverse Freedom Rider to come to Hyannis arrived on May 12th of 62. David Harris, a 43-year-old Army veteran in a suit and tie, received an enthusiastic welcome by a crowd of more than 100 people. There were several speeches, plenty of hands to shake, and lots of reporters. Senate candidate Ted Kennedy was there to meet him. Harris drew cheers when he told onlookers it, quote, felt mighty good when I crossed that Mason-Dixon line, unquote. In the weeks and months to come, the Greyhound buses kept arriving, but the spectators disappeared. Ted Kennedy never showed up again. The rest of the Kennedy family never made an appearance. Only a small crew of Hyannis residents, including the civil rights activist Margaret Moseley, remained. Hearing media reports that more Reverse Freedom Riders were on their way, religious leaders, the local NAACP chapter, and a few concerned residents teamed up to help. Their group was half black, half white. They divided the task and gave themselves a name, the Refugee Relief Committee. Quote, we call them refugees. They represented what we feel a refugee is. They were homeless, broke, tired, and afraid. We had to help them, unquote, Reverend Kenneth Warren, a Unitarian minister who was the chairman of the committee, said to a reporter at the time. That summer of 1962, Moseley carried the bus schedule with her. Among her many duties, she was in charge of greeting the new arrivals. Quote, most of the people who came had only a shopping bag with perhaps one change of clothing, unquote, said the late Moseley in an interview with the Tales of Cape Cod in 1994, 3 years before her death. The Reverse Freedom Riders arrived with, quote, no money knowing nobody, unquote. Moseley remembered one of the children who arrived asking, quote, where are the cotton fields, unquote. She told him there were no cotton fields. She said this news came as a terrible blow. She recalled the child saying, quote, well, what am I going to do to find employment? I can chop cotton, I don't know how to do anything else, unquote. The committee scrambled to help convincing the local community college to open its dorms to the new arrivals. The local jail provided the bedding, and when the summer semester started and students came back to the dorms, they got the governor to lobby for nearby Otis Air Force Base to open its barracks. At Otis, the rules were strict. Curfew was at 8 p.m. and lights were out at 8:30 p.m. Boys older than 5 were to be housed in barracks separate from their mothers. Heat and proximity to latrines were luxuries, not to be expected. Quote, they will be treated with firmness, with civility, with fairness, but not with familiarity, unquote, wrote Major General Thomas Donnelly, the man in charge of the base. Quote, the basic attitude is that these are people with problems that we are trying to help in finding solutions, unquote. But their efforts didn't stave off accusations from the segregationists that Hyannis was practicing forced segregation. In his effort to prove that white Northerners were indeed as racist as white Southerners, Singleman told reporters that Otis Air Force Base was equivalent to a concentration camp. Betty never thought of life in Massachusetts as a concentration camp, but, she said, things weren't easy. Quote, I used to never smile that much. I never smiled. I don't know why that was, unquote, said Betty, who joined her mother and 9 siblings in the fall of 1962. She was 18 and 8 months pregnant at the time. With her 2-year-old son in tow, her older sister Gloria and her 2 children also came in the fall. As the committee tried to disperse the Freedom Riders so it would be easier for them to find work, the Williams family was sent 100 miles north to Newburyport, Massachusetts, and Betty did find work cleaning houses. While she noticed the kindness of the townspeople, she said there were also a nagging feeling of distance and difference. She realized that Northerners, quote, don't think the same, they don't do the same, the culture is a whole lot different than where we were raised, unquote. As the reverse Freedom Riders adjusted to their new lives, the country around them debated whether to intervene. Illinois governor compared the reverse Freedom Rides to Nazis deporting Jews. A Mississippi congressman delighted in watching the North squirm, saying, quote, they want to free the Negro in the South, but want to shun responsibility for him once he has been freed, unquote. Governor John Volpe of Massachusetts pledged to help, but worries his welfare budget would be depleted. He asked the federal government to step in. President Kennedy largely tried to avoid the topic. When worried and enraged citizens wrote letters to the White House, the standard reply was that the situation was, quote unquote, deplorable, but, quote, there is no violation of the law, unquote. When Kennedy was asked about it at a news conference, he paused before saying, quote, well, I think it's a rather cheap exercise in, unquote. He hesitated, stumbled, and tried to dodge the question for more than a minute. Conversely, there were those who wrote hate mail to the Refugee Relief Committee about how the Bible calls for segregation, and even sending gag gifts, including a live possum and a goat to Hyannis for the reverse Freedom Riders to eat. But the prevailing sentiment was that the reverse Freedom Rides exposed the callousness of the Southern segregationists, not the hypocrisy of Northern liberals. Private citizens from across the country wrote to offer their support. Some suggested housing the reverse Freedom Riders in their own towns and homes. Others wrote checks. The first donation arrived from Little Rock, where many of the reverse Freedom Rides originated. By the late fall, the scheme fizzled out unceremoniously. Funds that the Citizens Council had raised were drying up, and riders were hard to recruit. Betty Williams was the very last reverse Freedom Rider to arrive in Hyannis, disembarking from her Greyhound bus on October the 17th. But even when it was over, the Williams family and the other reverse Freedom Riders were still 1,000 miles from anything that resembled home. Like many of those sent to Hyannis, the Williams family ultimately moved to Boston in search of work. They lived in one of the city's most notorious housing projects, the Bromley Heath Apartments. Milkmen and furniture delivery men were rumored to dodge the premises. Quote, the projects were nothing to be proud of, unquote, recalled Mickey. His memories of the place were dotted with cockroach sightings and crumbling concrete. As she had done in the South, Layla Mae tried to make life for her children as stable as possible in an unstable situation. She gathered discarded tires, filled them with dirt, and turned them into flower beds among the dilapidated brick apartment buildings. But apart from the flowers, things were collapsing. With their support network and their relatives half a country away, their tight-knit family began to fray, Betty said. Things the Williams family had never experienced in their tiny southern town. Drugs, jail, and unfriendly neighbors started to define their lives. Quote, things weren't like that when we were in the South, unquote, Betty said. Quote, all this happened when we came here, unquote. One thing from the South, though, had followed the family to the North, racism. Quote, we were being attacked in school by white kids, unquote, Mickey said, recalling Boston's efforts to desegregate through busing during his high school years. Quote, I just remembered that they were all outside surrounding the school. White people, white kids, young guys, old guys. They had dogs. They had chains. They were trying to get into the school, unquote. This wasn't what Layla Mae had envisioned for her children. From one of Boston's harshest street corners, during one of the city's worst chapters, quote, she tried with every ounce of strength that she had to try to hold this family together, unquote, said Betty. After years of processing what happened to their family, Betty and Mickey said they have resolved not to focus their energy on the segregationists who tricked their family. Quote, I don't want no hatred to live in my heart, nowhere. I don't have room for that, unquote, Betty said. Mickey, who has been working on a series of children's books about little-known African Americans who have done remarkable things, has spent years flipping through history books, unearthing forgotten stories, but it's only recently he said that he started to think that his own family's journey might have a place in history. In April of 2019, historian Clive Webb was cooking in his kitchen with the radio playing when a news story came on. He paused as he heard President Trump explain his ideas of putting undocumented immigrants on buses and dropping them off in so-called sanctuary cities. Quote, they want more people in the sanctuary cities. Well, we'll give them more people. We can give them a lot. We can give them an unlimited supply, unquote, Trump declared at a news conference. Quote, and let's see if they're so happy. They're always saying, we have open arms. Let's see if they have open arms, unquote. At the kitchen counter, Webb said he thought back to segregationists like Amos Guthridge, who had said the same of the Kennedy family and black people. Quote, in 1962, what was happening was the actions of a political fringe group, unquote, said Webb. Quote, and in 2019, it's the federal government, unquote. There is no evidence that the Trump administration has enacted the policy, and the White House did not respond to multiple requests for comment. According to Webb, the story of the reverse freedom rides is not a tale of how the United States is battling the same foes forever. Instead, he said, it is a reminder of how bystanders can foil a racist plot. Quote, the white conservatives who were behind that campaign then actually underestimated the decency of many ordinary people, unquote. But the story has been largely forgotten by the next generation of Americans. Even the Williams family tried to forget. Both Mickey and Betty said their mother never talked about the trick that was played on her. Quote, she never discussed anything, nothing at all, unquote, said Mickey. Quote, she didn't want to burden us, it was just pride, unquote. It might have been that pride or perhaps the haziness of the segregationists' lies, but the Williams family lore somehow became that they were freedom riders, not reverse freedom riders. Jamal Williams, one of Betty's sons and a professional skateboarder, said that growing up, whenever stories about the civil rights movement would flicker past on TV, his mother would say, quote, we played a part in this, unquote. It was only when his grandmother, Layla Mae, passed away in 2013 that Jamal had an inkling that there were more to know, that there was more to know. At her funeral, he saw a pamphlet about the reverse freedom rides. He went home and started Googling. Quote, I was like, whoa, unquote, Jamal recalled. He's still figuring out what to think. Quote, it was a horrible thing, the game of politics that these guys were playing, unquote, he said. Quote, but at the same time, I would not be here if that game was not played, unquote. So there you go. History repeating itself with Ron DeSantis and, of course, Trump. So you tell me, are they sending out making a statement that, hey, we're the white supremacists, come back here to try this all over? I mean, is that what they're saying? Because that's the only people who tried to pull that shit back in the 60s, okay? Were these white bigots who thought they were being cute by, tricking a lot of innocent people to go north in the hopes that they can better their families and themselves, and they used these poor people and sent them up there. And I can't help but think that, maybe Trump, maybe DeSantis were descendants of groups of people who did this shit. You know what I'm saying? Why don't we just look back in history or follow the family tree on both these families and see what their parents or grandparents did? Find out, whether these folks grew up in racist families. I mean, it probably wouldn't be that surprising if we found out that they did, because they certainly are acting that way right now, okay? But I'm just saying, these kinds of things get passed down. And like it just said in the article, I mean, a lot of Americans don't even remember that anymore, okay? But apparently these two individuals there, Trump and DeSantis, jumped on that old idea, hoping nobody would catch them on it, okay? But apparently, if you do a little bit of history search on Google, you'll find a story or two there about it. And, it just seems like what DeSantis did was damn near word for word, step by step, copying everything that these people did back then, okay? So he's basically saying, I'm the white hood, come back, now I'm a governor now, okay? Try and stop me. Well, hopefully the Justice Department, when they investigate DeSantis here, can figure out what kind of charges they want to levy on him, because he did break the law, okay, what he did, and this could mire his own ability to campaign for president, just like all the other investigations are miring Trump in his problems with the government, investigations. So, we really, as Americans, we can't allow things like this to go unpunished, okay? Laws have to apply to them just as they do to us, all right? Just because they wear a suit and tie and drive around in a limo doesn't mean that they are above the law, okay? That's not the reason why laws are there. They're there to enforce civility in this country, so that way things will operate, in a civilized fashion. And if we don't have that, we might as well have anarchy. And if we have anarchy, we don't even have a government. If we don't have a government, we just ain't got nothing to hang on the flagpole, right? So, I mean, what the hell is there to debate about this? And I'm hoping that more Republicans out there will wake up to this and decide, I don't want to be part of this anymore. They are descending into levels that I just cannot see myself sinking to. You're crossing lines that in my religion would call that as a sin, all right? So unless these people want to be tied to sin the rest of their life by, supporting these idiots, go ahead. I mean, it's just, you're not going to get anywhere. You're going to be on the losing end of that no matter what happens, okay? You're hitching your wagon on a falling star. So I would suggest that these people, these Trumplicans or whoever, reevaluate their position, because it's being very tenuous here to be a Trump supporter and have a good conscience about being one. They have to ignore a lot of stuff to say that it's good to be a Trump supporter. They have to really have blinders on at this point, okay? It's damn near impossible to ignore. So, anyway, that's it for today. I hope everybody has a great weekend. So please subscribe and comment. Keep your ears open to any local COVID-19 or monkeypox news. And please treat each other with kindness this weekend, and try not to thrust your anger into other people's faces, unjustly, because, that reason goes out the window and people just get their backs up, and before you know it, there's punches being swung. So don't take your anger out on others, and just be American. Okay? All right, I'll talk to you all later. Take care.